from where we left off, this work takes time and courage. Negative emotions like hopelessness, helplessness, and despair are hard to experience and harder still to grasp, so that we become observers of our mental and emotional states rather than being captured by them. I'm glad Cal has actually mentioned that word observer, because this is what we've been teaching. Honestly, this is the first time I've read this book as well, but this teaching seemed to automatically link in with the channelings, and I've been shown that that's going to happen all the way through the course of our journey together. So you need to become the observer of your mental and emotional states rather than being captured by them. One technique I've used in working with these kinds of emotion is to ask that feeling to flow through me. If I have tears to cry, I find a private place and let them come. This is what I was saying in the lessons, just when you need to cry, let yourself cry. And that includes you men out there as well. Just because you're a man, it doesn't mean to say, in fact, it takes the bigger man to cry. You're only a true man when you can cry, when you can release your emotions, because then you're getting in touch with your divine feminine as well as your divine masculine, and then you will truly find your power. Only through the divine feminine and the divine masculine can you find your true divine power. So if I have tears to cry, I find a private place and then let them come. If I have anger or other emotions, I find a totally private privacy which allows me to have a conversation with myself and out loud rather than in my imagination, where it has been cycling all day. As we give our feelings the respect they deserve, and as we listen to our own complaints carefully, we can often start fishing ourselves out the misery of these moods simply because we have at last heard ourselves. Clearing the energy body is not the Vulcan trick of repressing all emotion and asking instead of for logic to reign in one's mind. Rather, it is acknowledging all of what we are feeling and thinking, deliberately experiencing it all thoroughly, and then asking the mind to release the concern we have had about these feelings and thoughts. Whatever you trap inside your mind, I promise you, it only concentrates it. You think you're pushing it away because that's the right thing to do because you don't have time, or you don't want to face your emotions, or you don't want to release your emotions in front of people. But then you don't realize it just builds up, and then it escalates and it builds up, and that bad cycle goes round and round and round. Before you know it, you're in this tight loop, this tight knot of complete head fuck. And that head fuck is very hard to get yourself back out of. I can promise you that. So it's better to release these things as they come, as and when possible. To continue, again, it is essential to it is essential to prioritize cleaning and clearing the energy body of blockage above solving the problems which are seemingly causing the suffering. In our emotional lives, the real sources of our upset tends to be hidden in the patterns of sorrow and imbalance existing within us since childhood. It is no surprise then that some tangles in our lives take a long time to unravel. In terms of outer events, we may be working with stubborn tangles in various of our energy centers for years. We cannot comb a tangle out simply by wishing it to be so. However, we can almost instantaneously clear the red ray energy center of constriction by invoking faith and a larger point of view, and by asking ourselves to become the observer of ourselves, and then healers and balancers of our constricted energy flow, so that we once again are flowing with good energy. Some beautiful points there, and like I say, I haven't even read this book before. I've been meaning to read it for a long time. I bought it about a year ago, and just with everything going on, I just kept shoving it to the bottom of the pile. Knowing that it will be quite a dense book, knowing that Carla's language is usually quite dense, but she's writing really beautifully in this book, and in a very easy to understand way. So let's continue on to chapter 5, which is the orange ray energy center, our relationship with ourselves. This is also soul contracts that you have with other souls. So this isn't just yourself. It's a lot of it is yourself, but it's also any soul agreement, any soul contracts that you have with other souls. Okay, so this is a really important one. The orange ray is that influence or vibratory pattern wherein the mind-body-spirit complex expresses its power on an individual basis. The orange ray energies which we experience in our daily lives are all about loving ourselves and loving others. This is where the game begins, uppercase game, to get a more complex and interesting. We usually have not played on the flat game board with much thought of expressing love in our daily chores. Before conceiving of ourselves as spiritual seekers, or players with a capital P, we generally have confirmed or confined our moves to these available on the flat game board. We have analysed the advantages and disadvantages of each option and have used our logic in finding solutions. We have thought and planned and schemed. We have grabbed that parking place. We have persuaded that customer. On the flat game board, the main point is to win. This is where many human beings are still at. They're predominantly residing in their orange ray and red ray. The problem with playing the game of life entirely on the flat game board is that we shall never graduate from this environment using that flat game board alone. To graduate, we must also use the enhanced game board, capital G, which calls upon love, light, energy to help us get our hearts right. We want to get our hearts in the right place, and we want to keep them there. We want to graduate. The big capital game board has assets that help us to play the uppercase game of life, to work with and keep clearing the energy body pipeline up to the heart chakra. We are able to clear the red ray chakra quickly and simply as we acknowledge our sexuality and affirm the appropriateness of our instinct for survival. While the red ray center needs to be checked daily to be sure that the energy body is open, still the checklist is short. Am I okay with being a sexual being? Am I okay with living on planet Earth? If yes and yes, then we can move on. Unlike root chakra or red ray, the orange ray is able to bloom into more brilliance, articulation and clarity as we become better able to keep this energy center clear. We can and do create more and more facets on this orange flower-shaped center located along the spine at our belly as we work with the power that is ours within relationships. In orange ray work, issues continually mount up. We are never done with the clearing. It is like housework. Just as we can vacuum a carpet every day to remove the dirt each time, we can continually vacuum the house of our relationships within ourselves and others and find dirt to clean every time. The RA group says that the orange ray is that influence or vibratory pattern wherein the mind-body-spirit complex, which is their term for a person, it's actually their term for a soul. Yeah, express its power on an individual basis. And what is that power? It is our power to give or to withhold love, acceptance, forgiveness and compassion. It is our power to keep our promises and to treat people ethically, fairly and generously. And before we use this power on anyone else, we need to use it on ourselves. We need to learn to accept ourselves and treat ourselves with respect. Our feelings about ourselves run deep. Their power can lift us up or drag us down without our consciously realizing it. We often find that accepting ourselves is harder than accepting others. We can see in most cases that another person who is seemingly imperfect is actually dealing with difficulties and is doing a good job of coping under the circumstances. So you never know what people are going through until you've lived in their boots. This is the idea of reincarnation, the reincarnation cycles, so you can continuously keep living in other people's boots who you once criticized in a last lifetime. Okay? So anybody who you criticize or hold something against in this lifetime, whether it's a race of people or whether it's a certain person with a belief system, I can almost guarantee you will reincarnate as one of those people. so that you can understand what it's like to be on the receiving end of your criticism. Okay, we're all one. Don't forget. To continue, our compassion springs forth readily when it comes to being able to forgive ourselves for our self-perceived errors. However, we are often stern judges indeed. Indeed, you are the most stern judge that will ever judge you. You can judge yourself more harshly than any judge or any God ever would or could. And that's why it's left up to you to judge yourself. When you quote-unquote die, which doesn't really exist. To continue, how do we judge ourselves? One way is to internalize the scolding voices of our childhood. We keep those toxic voices from the long gone past audible by listening to them. What are the words in which our voices scold us? Mine tend to be, that is not good enough. Today, when I set out to do something and fail, my own reckoning, I can, if I listen, still hear the same voice that scolded me when I broke a heavy glass 55 years ago. I was about 7 years old trying to wash the family dishes, and I had to stand on a chair in order to reach the kitchen sink. The glass slipped from my hands in the soapy water and splintered. I was soundly scolded for my clumsiness. How well I recall the frustration of doing my absolute best and it not being good enough. As an adult, I can look back and see the child who was doing her level best. I can see that I was far too young to have been expected to do this chore. I can tell myself that my best effort, even if it failed, was good enough. I can be moved to true compassion for that little girl because until I start listening to my own voice, until I find mercy for myself, until I begin accepting and forgiving myself for breaking that glass over half a century ago, I am still a prisoner of my own persistent memory. This is called healing the inner child, by the way. Healing the inner child. And there's work that we're going to be doing and that I'm going to be channeling for healing your inner child. To continue, I do not know what your toxic voice says. I only know that the way to become a skillful player with a capital P is to lay them to rest. Maybe they were fair voices, maybe unfair ones. Either way, it is time past. That time has passed. We are in need to move on, and as uppercase players, we need to be in the present moment, free of the voices of days gone by. When we wander into self-judgment, we need to bring ourselves back to that balanced state wherein we can see our own goodness and worth as a soul and as a part of the Creator, as well as being aware of our perceived faults. I'm not saying that we never make mistakes. Of course we do. I'm not saying that we should ignore our mistakes. Not at all. We need to learn from them. I am not even saying that we are lovable all of the time. Most certainly we are not. We are all bozos on this bus. I am saying that we can learn to love ourselves knowing our faults. And that is what we need to do to open the door to our orange ray. At the core of keeping energy flowing through the orange ray center is developing the attitude of genuinely liking and I would say loving ourselves. Although loving yourselves brings you up to the green ray. Ultimately, the yellow ray and the green ray. That opens up your green when you can truly love you. But you have to start liking yourself. Until you can like yourself, how on earth can you love yourself? We spend a lot of time with ourselves. We know our thoughts and biases, spoken and secrets. We have created an inner world of our own in which our stream of consciousness flows. It is important to come into an abiding friendship with ourselves. If we do not like our own company, then how can we really enjoy anyone else's? If we do not have compassion for ourselves, then how can we have compassion for others? We really need to enjoy being who we are. That is essential for keeping the energy flowing through the energy body. It's a good place to stop. Namaste.